We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So if my colleagues can join us up here, please. All right.
No, we're waiting on the judge, huh?
Oh, he's not here?
That's what I heard.
He's running, was running about 10 minutes late, about 5 more minutes. Is there a judge in the building? Well, if there's not, if we don't have a... We have a very important guest that we're waiting on, I thought was here, so we'll wait a couple more minutes. You said he's 5 minutes away?
You said 5 minutes away? I'll be right back. I know.
Like, is there a judge in the house? Is there a doctor? I don't know, you tell me. Here, let me see. I did put in the request. Let's see.
Or whenever. I mean, you have my number right here.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's this. You know your mic is still. Oh, no way.
The day you leave.
What happened? All right, we're ready to rock and roll.
You gotta put on this roll.
Shit, you better hurry up. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Are you? Okay. Testing.
It's maintained contact.
Okay. All right, I don't have to push the thing. Oh, you lucky people that are coming. Wonderful. Right. The regular meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors of April 10, 2019 is now called to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Manser,
Here.
Mr. Oates, Ms. Lewis,
Here.
Mr. Fierro,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Dr. Hartsfeld, Ms. Wolfsey,
Here.
Ms. Robinson.
Here. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved. The chair recognizes the vote tally presented by the Kansas City Board of Elections for the April 2nd, 2019 election. It would now be in order to have a motion to approve the election results.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any debate on the motion? Seeing no debate, will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Oates,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Fierro,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes. The chair recognizes the Honorable Judge Kevin Harrell of Division 18 of the 16th Circuit Court. Judge Kevin Harrell was appointed to the bench on July 24th, 2012 by the Governor Jay Nixon. At that time, Judge Harrell was the Chief Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. In that position, he directly supervised the 5 chief trial assistants, the Chief of Operations, 2 Chief Warrant Officers, the Victim Services Division, as well, and he indirectly supervised an additional 186 employees, including assistant prosecutors, investigators, and supported staff. He worked for the prosecutor's office for 15 years. Judge Harrell is a Kansas City native who attended Bingham Elementary School through the 8th grade. He graduated high school from Pine Forge Academy, an academic boarding school in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. He obtained his JD degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City in 1998 and a Bachelor's of Arts in Administration of Justice from UMKC in 1993. In addition to his public service, Judge Harrell had the honor of being appointed by the Missouri Supreme Court to serve on its Regional Disciplinary Committee, which reviews public complaints filed against licensed lawyers. Judge Kevin Harrell will administer the oath of office to the newly elected board members. And so if we can ask them to please come forward. Representing Sub-District 1, Rita Cortez. Representing Sub-District 2, Nate Hogan. Representing Sub-District 3, Manny Abarca. Representing Sub-District 4, Marvia Jones. Representing Sub-District 5, Mark Wasserstrom. Our at-large member, Patty Manser. And our at-large member, Jennifer Wolfsey.
push the button and say it again.
We recognize Dr. Bedell to excuse the former members of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors.
At this time, board members, you are now excused. Thank you for your service.
We invite the Board of Directors to take their seats on the platform. You may take your name tags, former board.
I just didn't want you to be too shy. I wanted you up there with us. No, that's why I said, come on up.
He's going down there. He's going down there.
Yeah, okay.
Got it? Good evening. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Cortez.
Here.
Mr. Hogan.
Here.
Mr. Abarca. Dr. Jones. Mr. Wasserstrom. Ms. Manser.
Here.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Here.
We will now proceed with the election of the board. Sorry. We will now proceed with the election of officers. The first election this evening will be for the office of president of the board.
I'd like to nominate Patricia Manser for chair of the board, president of the board.
Are there any other nominations?
I nominate Manny Abarca IV as president of the board.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, nominations are closed. We will now proceed to the election. The candidates for president are...
Can we withdraw? I'd like to withdraw.
Thank you. So the nomination of Manny Abarca has been withdrawn. We have the nomination of Patricia Manser. We will now proceed to the election. The candidates for president are Patricia Manser. The selection will be conducted by roll call. We will first vote on the first person nominated and the only person nominated, which is Patty Manser. The secretary will call the roll. If you are in favor of electing Patty Manser, please vote yes. If you do not wish to elect Patty Manser, please vote no. If you wish to abstain, you may do so. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Patty Manser.
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez.
Yes.
Mr. Hogan.
Yes.
Mr. Abarca.
Yes.
Dr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom.
Yes.
I will now turn the seat over to your new president. You can stay there.
I'm so comfy here, I'm going to stay right where I am. All right. And I even got the gavel, Melissa. I've been wanting to use this thing. All right. We will now proceed to the next offices. It will stay on? Okay, great. So we will now proceed to the next offices. The next election this evening will be for the office of Vice President of the Board. Nominations are now open for Vice President.
I would like to nominate Nathaniel Nate Hogan.
Are there any additional nominations?
I nominate Rita Cortez.
Are there any additional nominations?
I would decline the nomination.
So Ms. Cortez has asked to decline that nomination. Hearing no further nominations, nominations are closed. We will now proceed to the election. The candidates for Vice President are Nathaniel Hogan. The election will be conducted by a roll call vote. We will first vote on the first person, or on Mr. Hogan. The secretary will call the roll. If you are in favor of electing Mr. Hogan, please respond yes. If you do not wish to elect Mr. Hogan, please respond no. You may also abstain. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfson?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
The results of the votes are unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Hogan. The next election this evening will be for the office of Treasurer of the Board. Nominations are now open for Treasurer.
I'd like to nominate Manny Abarca.
Are there any additional nominations? Hearing no further nominations, nominations are closed. We will now proceed to the election. The candidate for treasurer nominated is Manny Abarca. The election will be conducted by roll call. We will first vote on Mr. Abarca. The secretary will call the roll, and if you are in favor of electing Mr. Abarca, please respond yes. If you do not wish to elect Mr. Abarca, please respond no. You may also abstain. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfson?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
The results of the vote are in. Congratulations, Mr. Abarca.
All right.
The next election this evening will be for the office of Secretary of the Board. Nominations are now open for Secretary.
I'd like to nominate June Kolkmeyer.
Are there any other nominations at this time? Hearing no further nominations, nominations are closed. We will now proceed to the election. The candidate for secretary is June Kolkmeyer. The election will be conducted by roll call. The secretary will call the roll, and if you are in favor of electing June Kolkmeyer, please respond yes. If you do not wish to elect Ms. Kolkmeyer, please respond no. You may also abstain. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes?
Ms. Wolfson?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
Congratulations, Ms. Kolkmeyer. We will now turn to our business agenda for this evening. The chair recognizes Dr. Bell to present this update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I will have Linda Quinley to come up to the podium to discuss and provide to the board and the community a student transportation update. As many of you are aware, we recently approved a new contract with Student Transportation of America to move into a new era with our school bus service for the 2019-2020 school year. However, we still are under contract with First Student, and as you all know, at the previous board meeting, we had a parent who came up to speak regarding concerns about what's happening with students being picked up and taken home, and we wanted to provide an update as to what's going on and what we're doing about it.
Good evening, Board Chair Manzer, Dr. Bedell, and board members and guests. This is just a brief update of where we are currently with student transportation and how we see things working from now through the year end until we get transitioned to that new contract that Dr. Bedell mentioned. So we have some numbers for you as of last Friday. Basically, second semester, what we've experienced since we came back from Christmas break, a rising number of daily routes without a driver. And what that means is those routes don't run. Or they run on a sweep, which is after, so driver for bus A doesn't show up, but driver for bus B does. Driver for bus B runs his 1, 2, or 3 routes, and then he sweeps around and tries to pick up children from driver A's runs, which most likely are no longer at the stop waiting for a ride to school. So it's definitely having an adverse impact on attendance and learning, and so we're extremely concerned about that and working on how we get through the end of the school year. So as of last Friday, we had 131 routes that had not been run during second semester. As of today, that number is over 190. So it has become a greater issue as we transition through this difficult time of having a transitioning contract. You'll see there that we are also having some relatively late arrivals. Again, it has to do with the same situation. Maybe a sweep route is running. We've had after-school activities and during-the-day activities not covered. In some cases, students have missed out on opportunities. We actually, since spring break, have had 45 activity buses that First Student was unable to provide. All but 11 of those we covered with other vendors or chartered out with other districts to come take care of for us. But there have been 11 that the students have not been able to participate in that activity because of lack of transportation. We're experiencing a driver shortage in the taxi cab business as well as in the bus business across Kansas City, and so we have had issues with our taxi cabs as well. Last Friday, First Student indicated that they expected to be 20 drivers short Monday morning of this week. We, in fact, had 22 routes not run Monday morning. So that's a little bit of just some statistics and numbers. The cause is driver shortage. And there are a few different reasons for the driver shortage. As you transition a contract, there's a little concern and fear from those drivers. Am I going to have a job? Should I go take something else now? And we certainly understand that, but want both of our companies, our current company, our future company, to be doing all they can to encourage drivers to stay in good standing with First Student through the end of this year in order to be picked up next year by STA and be a responsible driver for the district. So we are seeing that happen. First Student is having a difficulty with recruitment and hiring. They have an obligation in their contract to not only have enough drivers to run the daily routes, but to have an appropriate subpool of about 10%, which is 16. And at this point, we are not accomplishing either of those. You may have seen on the news last night, Park Hill talked about this very situation and is proposing to their community that they combine routes and lengthen routes next year in order to need less drivers. The amount of drivers needed when you look at public KCPS, charter schools, and our outlying districts is just more than our community can currently support in that job pool. We've really ramped up our communications in the last few weeks as we've become aware of the significant rise in this issue that we're having. So every morning, First Student lets Transpar know what routes they are not running. Just as a reminder for those of you who are new, Transpar has a management contract right now for the district, and First Student has the busing contract. So Transpar's job is to route buses and give those routes to First Student, and then First Student's job is to run those routes. So First talks to Transpar, lets them know what's happening. Transpar is to communicate via school messenger blast to families to let them know if their bus is not coming or is going to be significantly late. Transpar communicates with me every morning and every afternoon about routes that are not running. And then I am now communicating with school leadership groups so we can make sure principals know which buses we're having challenges with. So a heightened level of communication for awareness until we get this resolved. So what are we going to do? First Student and Transpar are working right now to eliminate some of our smaller routes by merging routes together, moving kids onto cabs if we can get cabs to eliminate the need for a driver. By Friday of this week, we will have eliminated 8 routes. And so that's about halfway to our driver shortage that we have right now. We're going to continue looking at that to see what we can do. In the meantime, we have 3 other options of things we can and are doing. We are set to pick up on Monday 4 short buses under lease from Masters Transportation. Those buses will be used largely for after-school activities. We want to make sure spring is a very busy after-school activity season, and we want to make sure that our kids aren't missing those opportunities. That will be their primary purpose. The good thing about a 15-passenger yellow school bus in Missouri is that any of you can drive it if you have a valid driver's license. You do not need a CDL to do so. So we'll be asking our coaches who are willing to take their small teams and get them directly there themselves. We'll create a little more efficiency for them. We can also use those in the mornings if we have routes that are missed that are small, and we have someone who can hop on that bus and go pick those kids up. Additionally, we are looking at other carriers and other districts where we could offload some routes that First Student indicates they cannot hire enough drivers to cover. We'll also be using KCTG that we use fairly regularly for activities. We may be using them. They'd have to be very small routes because you have to have kids in a yellow school bus if there are 9 or more, if there are 10 or more of them on the bus. And so we can only do really short runs with them, but KCTG may pick up some of our daily routes as well. Questions?
Are there any questions? Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, Madam Chair, would you prefer that I ask one question and then go around, or you want me to ask
If you
it?
would keep it to one question, then
Okay.
we'll give others opportunity.
Oh, man, I've got several. Which one's most important?
We'll come back around.
So on the causes slide, Ms. Quinley, do you believe, minus the last bullet around the employment pool saturation piece, do you believe that there's a connection between the drivers not showing up and them being disgruntled about the new company coming on board, or is there a connection between First Student almost encouraging these drivers not to show in some sort of underhanded way?
You know, I don't know for certain. That's certainly a possibility. We do know that First Student has some other contracts in town that they're struggling with driver shortage on as well. They actually have the Park Hill contract that is struggling with a little bit of driver shortage, but it could be any of those things.
Additionally, Mr. Hogan, I can tell you I had dinner with the St. Louis superintendent on Sunday night, and they're having a tremendous amount of issues with transportation, and they are currently utilizing the same company. So I don't know that it's just locally here in the Kansas City region. I will say this to everybody in the audience. I think we have to take into account that both St. Louis and Kansas City has a tremendous amount of school choice. I don't know what's going on with this echo. Is it this? Okay. And because of that, then resources are spread thin. I think the 2 of our systems are experiencing that when we think about the talent pool, whether it's school bus drivers, whether it's teachers, whether it's even as you're trying to look for administrators, because as we stated previously, when you have 3 buses driving down the same street to pick up kids at the same stop to take them to 3 different locations, the inefficiencies, in my opinion, has also helped to create what we're dealing with right now. And that's part of the reason why with this new contract, we wanted to begin to have further conversation with charters around how we could collaborate and look at shared services such as transportation, food services, and things of that nature.
Mr. Abarca?
Ms. Quinley, can you tell us about the financial impact for this new method that we're pursuing, as well as what retribution maybe is coming from our previous contract for them failing?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So currently, there are liquidated damage clauses inside our contract with First Student. If they don't run a route, we of course don't pay for that route. And I'll just give you some numbers as example. If a bus runs 3 tiers, they do first, second, and third tier, that's $418 a day for the school district. So First Student does not receive that payment and we penalize them $418 a day. So we do assess those liquidated damages. We're at over $100,000 this year in liquidated damages to first student. Last year it was about $25,000 in liquidated damages. So the KCTG option is much more expensive. I think we'll be okay in our total budget because of the amount of liquidated damages we've charged and the fact that additionally we've not been paying first what they would earn under their contract if they were meeting it fully.
Dr. Jones?
Yeah, so my question is about the impact on families and specifically with the district's emphasis on attendance and this whole 90-90 plan. What has been occurring with the students? Is it marked as an absence, or is it an excuse? How does this work?
It has been an absence. The good and bad news is while it's unacceptable and we're not getting kids to school like we need to be, we don't have it being the same route every day. So I have asked Transpar back here to make me a log of which routes each day so that then we can go through and provide school leadership with information on that this child, if they were absent on these days, it likely related to that. But at this point, it's an absence and we're determining that actual impact.
And I'll just chime in. I did make a phone call to the Commissioner of Education today at DESE to make her aware of what we're dealing with right now, because you're absolutely right. It impacts attendance. It really bothers me because we're on the verge of, we have our good academic framework in place, our instructional framework in place. Everybody knows what they're doing right now, and to have some of our plans be derailed by services that we're paying people to provide really concerns me, especially as we're trying to fight to get our full accreditation back. And so all of this has a trickle-down impact that also impacts us from a morale standpoint. So I do want everybody to be clear that we wanted to be very transparent with the community about what we're dealing with, but we also did make phone calls to the state. And I did even share with my staff recently, I think it was on Monday, I was in New York, and I said to them, if I need to come back and we need to look at administrative policy and use the district vehicle to go pick up some kids, then that's just what we're going to have to do.
Additionally, it impacts a couple of funding things. We are paid by the state based on average daily attendance. So not only are kids not having the opportunity to learn and eat and be present, but it also is having an adverse impact on what our total funding from the state will be this year. And then it has an impact on the efficiency measure inside the transportation formula that will reduce our transportation funding.
Thanks. I love these new microphones, just for the record. So what we've all been talking about, is there a possibility of actually calculating, Dr. Bedell and Ms. Quinley, for the Friday update, the actual impact to not only attendance, learning seat time, because I know and that's going to hit us, funding both to the K-12 and to the transportation. I mean, this also means if a student does not get to school and they rely on our schools for lunch or breakfast or dinner, then they're not getting that. I mean, right. I'd like to kind of put numbers so we can really understand, and to be honest, not to overdo this, but it would be interesting. It feels a little retaliatory, a pre and a post, what an average would have been.
Yeah. We are working on gathering that data for you because we may, in conversations with legal, we may need to use that information as we go on.
Okay, Mr. Hogan?
So clearly you've got a plan that you're working through to deal with the shortages today, but thinking about this new company coming on, and I know a few board meetings ago as you guys were deliberating about the new organization and kind of sharing with the public what that would look like. They're all new school buses, which is good for the environment, it's good for students, it's good for drivers as well, but what contingency are we putting in place in case all of those don't get delivered on time?
In case the buses don't all get delivered on
Correct.
time? We feel really good about that. The buses were ordered the day after the board approved the contract. We're expecting first shipment the first week of July and last shipment the last week of July. So right now they are in the makes. So we've we don't have any reason to think those buses won't arrive. If they don't, STA has contracts in Center, Columbia, and they just won the Special District of St. Louis as well. They'll be picking up that district in Missouri, and then they have a couple of Kansas. So they will get us some used buses down here should the new bus order not fully show up.
I think my question really comes back to, given the importance of attendance and having students at school, both from the learning standpoint, but that's a really critical area in our accreditation and our accreditation scoring. Do we believe if this is a condition that is somewhat, it's been exacerbated recently, and it's going to have an impact, and as we work through it, and we see other school districts having a problem, do you think there might be any flexibility at the state when it comes to scoring us for attendance?
I'm not sure. Based on my conversation with the commissioner today, she told me that she would speak with Roger Dorson, who kind of handles this particular area. He is the assistant commissioner, and we're supposed to get back on the phone. I don't know how many other school districts are dealing with this or whether they have brought this to her attention. But I don't know if it's a singular school district that they would make any type of concessions for us. But I plan on talking to her about, if we can demonstrate to you the detrimental impact that this is having on us, if it is one, and I think we'd have to quantify that, would there be some type of grace from the state? So we'll finish the conversation tomorrow. I did call her back today and just couldn't get back with her after I had spoken with her earlier.
Mr. Abarca?
To our vice chair's earlier point, are there concessions put into our budgetary process to make sure that if the new contract, if anything happens similar to this, that we are prepared for that financially and also, retributions and all that stuff?
Yeah, that contract also has liquidated damage clauses that we will assess in the same manner we have been assessing with this one, and then we'll leave ourselves enough room in the budget that if we have to do something special, we have the resources to do it.
Is there any ability either in this one or the next one to talk about some of those other peripheral things in terms of damages there? Because I don't know that we need to quantify that by a monetary demand, but it seems like this is really affecting, it's having a ripple effect in multiple ways, and the only way that we can seek that retribution would be potentially financial. Is there any?
And that's where conversations with legal are taking place, looking at what is meeting and not meeting the contract you've been engaged for.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we will go to the workshop presentation for Policy Monitoring Report 1.3, engaged in the improvement of their community. The chair recognizes Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. As you all know, we conduct a monthly board monitoring of board policy, generally 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. These are the ends that the superintendent and the administration are charged to conduct and to make sure that we are advancing the school district. This month, we will focus on 1.3, which will deal with a various amount of some of the social aspects of developing our students. And so at this time, I'll pass it over to Dr. Shepard and Dr. Wilson.
Good evening and welcome aboard. So tonight we will be presenting on Policy 1.3, and the first person who you will hear from is Dr. Jermaine Wilson, and he is our Director over Guidance and Counseling, and he will come and talk to you about our graduation. One of the requirements of our graduation is service learning, and he will come and talk to you and give a status update on that, and then you will hear further from other members of our team on the social emotional supports and things and how we are doing in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Good evening, Superintendent Bedell, Board Chair Manser, and welcome to our new members of the board. I'm excited to present updates on service learning, which is a part of Board Policy 1.3.1. So just some background information. As a part of our graduation requirements in the district, we required students to complete community service hours. One of the things that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has asked is that all of the districts in Missouri take a progressive shift to service learning from community service. And so we began that transition last school year. And so just as some background information, when we think about service learning, some of the ways we're trying to reframe that for our students in the schools is, one, having activities that are organized and have an intimate connection to academic courses and curriculum, that also have clearly stated objectives, that require students to do some reflection and critical thinking about what they learned from the activity, and then to be able to engage in discussions with their peers around how it's really impacting their community to do more. So just as an update, last year at this time when we tracked our students that were on track to completion of service learning hours in the gold, you'll see that's where we were with all of our high schools. This year you'll see that all of our high schools have shown gains, and I think those gains are attributed to concentrated efforts by our graduation team. So our principals at the building, our teachers that have been on board with helping to motivate our students that have engaged in the work and asking those students, how can you push? How can you get your peers to contribute more, to really think about how they can impact and what the needs of their community are? And so we're excited to see the growth. Of course, we want to always continue to push even higher. One thing that we realized last year was that many of our students, they wait until their senior year to begin engaging in these processes. And so one of the things that we want to do is get students started as early as 8th grade and thinking about service learning and what it really means to impact their community through this mechanism. Some of our high school interventions that are listed here are high school interventions that all of our high school, we call them graduation task force from last year, that we see across the board at all of our high schools. So working with opportunities and agencies for different service learning opportunities. And when we have agencies that are having any difficulties getting in contact with the school or that need a bridging or a connection, one of those things that they do is contact me, and then I go and meet at the school with them and help connect them to administration, to counselors, to senior sponsors to provide those opportunities. We also started having conferences with students and parents to notify them of where they stand with their hours. Particularly our students that were extremely far behind when they got to their senior year, and really helping the parents to understand the importance of service learning. Each of our schools have began offering opportunities for tutoring and service in their buildings. We even this year had opportunities for students to actually come and work in our human resources department as a service learning project to assist. And so I think that was very much so impactful in helping our staff here at the central office building to connect with our students and helping them to reach their goals towards graduation. We offer incentives and competitions for service learning projects. And so across our schools, you'll see different groups of students that have engaged in a competition. We see competitions between the grade levels, who can get the most community service hours in a quarter, and then we have ways that we can visually track those in the school. Classroom opportunities for service learning. Our teachers have been extremely forward-thinking in asking them, what are the ways that you feel like you can help students to connect with real-world impact in your classrooms, and what does it look like for students to engage in those opportunities and to push their learning forward so that it actually touches people outside of the classroom walls. And we've had many teachers that have led the charge with actually establishing what service learning could look like in their content areas and motivating students to engage in those opportunities. Early opportunities for service learning. I think engaging our students as early as 8th grade has been a benefit for us in helping them to begin thinking about it, helping them to engage in what it's going to look like when they get to graduation. What are the things that you can begin doing now that will help you to be successful by the time that you reach graduation? We've also established many partnerships with community corporations and agencies that have offered opportunities in a flexible way for our students. So when we think about students limited, many of our students, when they go home after the school day, some of them just do not have the time to where they can go and contribute to service learning. So some of our partnerships with the district, being able to offer flexible scheduling for students on the weekends, when traditionally they wouldn't have those opportunities offered. Sometimes having them on particular days with us kind of gauging from different schools, what is the day that we need opportunities for students, and how can we assist with that? And then many of our high schools have engaged in tutoring for either elementary or middle school students, which one helps our elementary and middle school students to see that their students are giving back to them. Many of them have connections, whether they're relatives or students that used to be a part of the school, and then they buy into that process. But it also helps the students to establish the moral imperative of giving back to the community as well by way of contributing to their schools. And in many cases, we have students who are giving back and tutoring to schools that they came from. Some of our observations that we've made this year about service learning, still the lag in students waiting until senior year and the second semester to really be progressive about graduation. There's still an issue with many of the students when I go on the campus and talk to students that are behind, just them really struggling to find the time and the opportunities. Many of them are saying, I have so many things going on. It's a task just to make it to school to be successful. And so then we can have a conversation with counselors in the site, with administrators about what we can do to bridge opportunities for those students in the school day so there's no transition, but also that it's not taken away from instructional time. And then just the continued need to make a stronger relevance for service learning as the graduation requirement versus just doing community service activities. And so as we look at our progress update, some of the things that we're doing this year to further our progression with service learning is we began shifting into service learning with reflections and orientations. So with our seniors in each of our schools, actually talking to them about what service learning is and what's expected of them. When students are doing service learning, also asking them to give us a short reflection, a couple of paragraphs around how they feel that this impacted the community. One of the things that we decided to do last year was to begin offering service learning opportunities through our end-of-course exam subject areas. And so we met with a group of teachers when we were going to try and roll it out. The consensus for many of the teachers was, let us think about it this year, let us collaborate and find out how we can put that into our standard curriculum so that everybody is moving forward in a concentrated effort. One of the things that teachers had as a concern was, we may do a really good job of putting it in, embedding it into our curriculum at this school, but at another school they may not have that opportunity. So we want to have some consensus across the board, even giving examples of what it looks like in the content area. So we know that that's a need that we need to provide more professional development on in the staff, but then began to move into that to help teachers to think about, as I'm teaching this subject in a content area, how am I going to help my students to think about the impact outside of the classroom with this? One of the things students across the nation always struggle with is, what is the relevance of what I'm learning in the classroom? We've also started tracking our service learning through a program called X2Vol, and we did it this year with 2 pilot schools. We did it with Lincoln College Prep and with Paseo Academy. Lincoln College Prep was our school that was furthest along with the Naviance platform, and the X2Vol platform naturally links into it, so students can go and log their hours through Naviance. And so that was the natural choice for Lincoln. Paseo was one of our schools at the beginning of the year that said, we want to begin transitioning our students into using this online platform. And we know that it's going to be difficult because students are used to the traditional, I fill out a form and submit it, and then somebody has to input it. Going through X2Vol really requires the students to put in their reflection and then to actually have a verifier of their service learning hours. And so they agreed to do that. The students, once they've got on and gotten to the habit of doing it, I think the consensus of many of the seniors is they're able to find more value. And what we found is once students start tracking service learning hours, we see them escalating. Like, they don't just stop at the 40. We also are providing opportunities for our high school students this summer to log service hours, and then our avid students that are in all of our secondary schools, with the exception of Lincoln at this time, are establishing a day of service learning that they will start next year, and they'll have a fall project and a spring project. Are there any questions?
Mr. Abarca? And then,
The first question I have is, do we have any sort of like volunteer fair, or how do people plug in who are maybe external of the school district to expose our students to opportunities that are outside of there? So neighborhood associations come, chambers of commerce can come. What are we doing to engage and bridge that gap between community and the district?
Excellent question. One thing we do is we try and push out to all of our partners that are established partnerships with the district. We send out a request for opportunities for our students. Anytime we have an opportunity to engage those organizations, we ask them, are there opportunities for our students to gain service learning hours by doing some type of project with your organization? I think we start to see that's an area sometimes where it's not coherent, because we have some organizations that connect really well and have established partnerships with a certain high school. And so then they bridge with that one high school. And then we have other organizations that connect, and they either come through any of our personnel here at central office, or they'll send me an email, and then I'm able to connect them to the schools.
So that sounds like the district is waiting to receive versus us necessarily engaging with the community. I mean, from a neighborhood association perspective, there's not really been much on the opposite end as much as we've been reaching out. So I wonder if there's more opportunity there. So.
And I think there is opportunity as we continue to push out X2Vol, because through X2Vol, organizations are able to give us a request. And so they're able to say, I have an opportunity for 15 students, and this is the date, this is the time, this is how we need students to contribute. And then students can begin signing up with that. So I think just making sure that most of our neighborhood organizations and community organizations are aware of that platform.
Dr. Jones?
I just have a question about how do you think it would be feasible? How feasible do you think it would be for us to include more web-based opportunities for kids to engage? So if there is a way that students could log in and do projects, computer-based projects that are still logging the hours, I think that might be an alternative for kids who can't find the time to get somewhere or transportation.
Absolutely. I think it will be feasible, and where we see most of our students are really in tune with online learning and connected to technology. I think for many of our students that are struggling to find the time, that will be an excellent opportunity for us to expand options for students.
Ms. Wolfsey?
So I know the last time you brought this to us, one of the things that I noticed over spring break was that you had added Naviance to the Tyler system, like I had mentioned, so that parents who log in with secondary students, you're typically logging in, kind of checking grades and whatnot, which I thought was fantastic, because I can finally go in. I don't know if X2Vol is connected into Naviance where I could see where my child could see these opportunities. Is it?
It is.
Okay.
It is. You go through your Naviance account, and then you go
get
into
in
the
there.
X2Vol.
So I played around with it. I think kind of to Board Member Abarca's point, sometimes I think we have these awesome tools, but we don't let everybody, we don't promote them. We don't do an actual campaign of awareness, not only to us as parents, but to outside folks who would actually populate potential opportunities. So that would be my one challenge, is that we would, because I see this as, if I'm a parent, this is a great opportunity for my student. And I would see this as something I would like to see at my child's secondary school. So, but if I don't know about it, I don't see that as an opportunity for them. But also, I think once parents do become aware of it, and even outside neighborhood groups and people who want to populate the opportunities, it will start to become very much word of mouth, and it will feed itself.
Seeing no other questions, I think we're ready for the next presentation. I'm sorry, Mr. Barca?
Two quick things. Do we have extracurricular activities in line with these missions? So National Honor Society, student councils at 8th grade through? And then the second part of that is, are we setting examples from staff, administration, and even board to help show these students that not only are we preaching it, but we're also doing it? For the second part, yes. We do have staff members that partner
to model and take the lead in many of these efforts. You will actually hear later reports on extracurricular activities that are occurring in our schools.
Thank you so much, and I think I'm looking forward to hearing more about how parents will become engaged in that process. So Dr. Bedell?
So our next person who will be presenting as a part of Board 1.3.1 policy is Dr. Darren Slade, our Assistant Superintendent of School Leadership.
Good evening, Dr. Bedell and new board members. I want to report out on our behavior-related policies and data. I reported out earlier this year, and the news was not as great, so I'm happy to report that, and I'm reporting on suspension data, mainly out-of-school suspension and in-school suspension, and the goal of the system is, and this is a national situation where we're trying to reduce the number of days that students spend out of school as a result of suspension and increase the amount of time that students spend in classrooms. So again, I'm happy to report, opposed to what I reported the first time earlier in the year, that suspensions are down across the district at every level, elementary, middle, and high school. It's a big difference, almost half. And we're also reduced when we compare the data to the same time last year. Okay, so the way we report out on data on suspensions, we have out-of-school suspensions, OSS, in-school suspensions, ISS. We use detention in some of our schools. We have situations, we talked about buses today, and sometimes we have issues on the bus, so we have like different policies for that, mainly parent conferences for bus situations. We also have something called AOSS. We don't use it as much, but it's a long-term suspension that's not served at home, but served in another building or facility in our system. So looking at this data chart, elementary suspensions compared to last semester are down almost by half, out-of-school suspensions and in-school suspensions. The number of days that students have spent out because of suspensions the second semester have also reduced by half. And if we look at what students are being suspended for at the elementary school level, it's mainly fighting and chronic misconduct, which means you repeat some of the same behaviors that we have listed above. I wanted to highlight one school that had a big decline from last year, King Elementary School. They had a lot of challenges last year. Suspension rates were up. But if you look at the data now, they're almost down by half. And these are some of the things that happened that we're doing differently at King. Mainly, it's a big focus on keeping students at school. I was a former principal. It's mainly a mindset change. In the past, the first thing that some schools would do is send students home as soon as they acted up. Now schools are trying to keep students in school. We're doing things like home visits. We're having parent conferences. We're bringing parents in to discuss how we could do better to keep their children in the building. We also have parents coming in to shadow students. Middle school has always been probably the biggest area where we've had students act up and we had to suspend. And I'm happy to report that if you look at our middle school data, same thing, our suspension numbers are down by half, both ISS and OSS. The number of suspension days are also down by half, and it's looking like we're going to end the year with a big decline in suspensions compared to last year. Behavior events at the middle school level, the main thing is defiance of authority. You know, at that age, sometimes students don't want to follow directions, so it's mainly insubordination and refusing to basically follow the directives of the adults in the building. High school, same thing, suspensions and ISS are down by half. Days are almost down by half. If you look at OSS, we do have situations, to be honest, where we do have to suspend extremely violent acts, fights, assaults on staff. Those things still happen. We still have to suspend students, and they do have to spend some time away from the school. But one thing that we're doing that's different is when students come back to school, we have a reentry procedure where they're meeting with parents, and we're discussing what can you do differently when you return to make sure the behavior doesn't occur again. Same thing at the high school level. The main thing is defiance of authority. And Central Middle School had, I think, the biggest or the most suspensions last year at this time. And if you look at Central Middle School, their numbers are also down by half. A big thing we're doing at some of our high schools is just promoting school pride and spirit. There's a big focus on social emotional learning. We have PSC teams in place. We started the training early in the year, and as you see every month, as adults are becoming more aware of how the PSC teams, problem-solving teams should function, our suspension numbers are going down. And another thing that's different this year, Dr. Bedell is requiring that all long-term suspensions be approved by the assistant superintendent, and in some cases, like for myself, we're going to knock on doors and have conversations with the parents as assistant superintendents to kind of get a better understanding of what's happening in some of our schools with our students not following or demonstrating inappropriate behavior. What's being done at all schools, we spotlighted 2 schools. In every school, we're requiring administrators to follow these Tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions. If a student does something minor, we look at Tier 1 interventions, mainly parent conferences, phone calls, home. We take away recess. For something more severe, we move to Tier 2, buddy rooms, parent conferences. And for the more severe acts, we move to OSS, ISS, and more difficult consequences. Next steps, what we're going to do as the year, mainly before the school year ends, we're going to have focus groups with students. We learn a lot from students on what could be done to help reduce suspensions. We're going to have focus groups with teachers and administrators. They're the ones who are on the front line. And we're also going to have, sometimes parents and students just don't know what the expectation is. So one thing, we're requiring orientation for all newcoming students. And during our orientation sessions and all other summer activities this year, we're going to have training sessions on how to deal with different situations. And we're going to really focus on scenarios because it's different scenarios require different responses. And that's one thing we've been doing all year also, is just having scenario-based training. Any questions?
Mr. Hogan?
So thank you for this work. This is super important stuff, and I know it's not easy stuff, but it's really, really important, and we know a lot of bias plays into what kids get suspended and how frequently they do. One question I have for you, though, is in terms of, I mean, it's obviously a great thing to bring the number of suspensions down by keeping kids in school and then applying these different interventions at different levels, but have you been tracking the data on the number of incidents that have reported or have been reported versus prior to the interventions being put in place?
We have a great data team here. We track everything related to suspensions. We track every type of behavior that the students are involved in. And we have all that data. I just didn't display it tonight.
No, I'm just curious, are you seeing that the interventions are actually reducing the number of reported incidents?
We have a major reduction in reported incidents, and it's mainly because we're building stronger relationships and buildings with students.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
And I'll just tag on. I mean, one of the things I will tell you are our problem-solving teams. That is making a world of a difference. Having conversations about students and trying to get to the root cause of why they behave in certain ways. And in many cases, when you attend those and you have a parent in there, the parents are in many cases saying, I really appreciate this because I don't know what to do. So they're actually looking for help. And so the problem-solving teams and the implementation of that this year, I think will pay huge dividends moving forward as our teachers and our staffs get better with it.
Mr. Barca?
Have you laid the academic performance on top of some of these behavior issues to see if there's any correlations? And if so, how and what are we doing to try and address that?
Research clearly states that sometimes when students are not able to function in the classroom, they're behind, they sometimes act out. And one thing that we're doing that I like is everything is connected. So we have PLCs where teachers are talking about the academic challenges that students have. Then we also have PSTs where we're talking about how those academic challenges are impacting behaviors. And something we're moving into next year, we're moving into RTI, and we're going to talk about how do we appropriately respond to these students and make sure we get them back on track.
RTI is response to intervention.
Response
and PLC, that's okay. And PLCs are professional learning communities.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Dr. Jones and then Ms. Wolfson.
I just had a quick question and comment. If you look at slide 18, and this trend is the same for the middle, high, and elementary, this piece about defiance of authority, I just would submit that it might be helpful to break that down into greater, y'all probably already have that background data, but I think that's one of those gray areas where that's in the eye of the beholder. So what does defiance look like for different groups of people? And if we could get more of a handle on what's being defined as defiance and for whom, I think that might help as well. But I do applaud the previous board and the current people for working on reducing these suspensions.
We just want to be consistent across the schools in how we respond to behavior, because there is some bias sometimes. So we want to make sure that we respond consistently. If a student does something in one school and they receive a suspension, we want to make sure that's fair across the board.
All right, Ms. Wolfsey.
Thanks for the report, Dr. Slade. So problem-solving teams, we've talked about them a lot, and you're going to hear me ask this again. So I know they're new, and we're trying to get them consistent and high-achieving, but like eventually being able to know where are our schools as far as PSTs? Are they basic, intermediate, advanced? Where are they on that scale of moving up? Because I know we were just kind of getting into them this year, right? If I remember correctly. So that's just one thing that I want to make sure we, maybe in a couple of Friday updates or so. Can I ask another question? Madam Chair, so do parents know about our problem-solving teams and how to ask for help, or is it more the commonplace that something happens and a student's, PST gets together and talks about it and reaches out? Because I'll just tell you, it's a common refrain. They'll get used to hearing me say this. We as parents, we want, a lot of us that are having issues with students, they actually, we might want to reach out to the PST, but if we don't know the PST exists, or is it always that we should just go through our teacher and the counselor? So those sorts of things, you don't have to have an answer, but I'm just trying to make sure that when administration is thinking about it, you put yourself in the shoes of the parent of like, how do I know about these sorts of tools that are available to me?
I do know that principals are sending out, starting at the beginning of the year, principals sent out information related to what's going on in their buildings, and we try to relay that information at PTA meetings. We also try to send out information via the website and all that. And again, one of the things that we try to do is really have ongoing contact with parents, but you are correct. Sometimes when I'm out doing home visits and I'm knocking on doors, parents are still not aware, so we are trying to make sure that we use every possible avenue to communicate what's going on in schools. So I do know that principals have been sending that information out since the first month of school.
So I know that this is an area where there's high public accountability. There are local organizations and child advocates and others who are looking for us to ensure that we are not, overutilizing some of those tools. So, and I know that's something that we're working on very hard. My question is related to some of the restorative practices, given that we know there's a lot of stress and trauma and just challenges that students come into the school with. So just very quickly, I'd like to know, do we have internal trainers who are skilled in restorative practices? Are we utilizing external partners to conduct that?
So most of our schools have, especially our high schools and middle schools, we have City Year that we're using. We have community in schools. We have trauma-based supports that I think Molly Tickner, who will be coming up next, will talk about. So we do have different resources in our building to address the trauma, because as you said, you are correct. If you just look at some of the things that are happening in the community, you have to have that in place because it does impact students once they walk into the schoolhouse.
Thank you.
I do want to add that we sent our entire curriculum team to be trained in Dallas on restorative practices. And so what they'll be doing next year is they'll actually be able to help all teachers incorporate this. And then even Dr. Davis went to be trained so that we can make this common language and common nomenclature in our professional development for teachers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can we forward it to the next slide?
This time, Molly Tickner will be coming up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Bedell, Board Chair Manzer, and newly appointed board members. I am Molly Tickner, Director of Behavioral Health Services, and I will be speaking to Student Support Services, providing an update related to Board Policy 1.3.3 and also Strategic Priority 4.2, which focuses on safety nets, primarily related to social emotional learning and social emotional supports. Just going to highlight a couple of things that we have done in support of the problem-solving teams. Our department, our division, has been helping in collaboration with school leadership in order to consult on PSTs, who should be part of PSTs. We're also part of that training process with all the administrators, the vice principals, and as the teams came together, including the school counselors, on really rolling out the processes and making a clear line of communication so they know how to access and who to access. Our staff also frequently attend the problem-solving teams when they're requested to, or when there is a need that's related to social emotional learning. That's either through outreach from the parents or outreach from the teachers or the administrators. One of the couple things that we've been doing that we're really excited about is really creating a documentation system in terms to track our social emotional supports that our mental health clinicians and our family support providers have been doing throughout the year. We're expanding that this year. As you may have heard, we have recently entered into a memorandum of understanding with Social Solutions, which is a national agency that really helps provide a streamlined intervention to track the interventions, as well as to produce outcomes, and also to link our community partners together to make a streamlined referral system. So we're excited for the opportunities for that, to create some more accountability on that. A few other things that we've been able to do. We were able to add more mental health professionals and case managers to our division this last year. I'm happy to report that the data that we've been collecting so far, for the whole school last year of 2017-18, our staff were provided 1,419 interventions to families. This year, and we're not even finished, this is just through March 2019, we've been able to provide 3,825 direct interventions to our families and our students this year. We've also been able to, with the help of Dr. Cordoba and Eva Santiago and the ELL, our English Language Learning Department, to provide additional focus to support our immigrant and our undocumented and refugee families through some partnerships with like the Mexican consulate, as well as providing adult learning education classes to our families. And so we've been really proud of being able to have that partnership and expand the social emotional supports for our undocumented families. This is an example of the interventions we provided. I pulled this report from Tyler, which is our student information system. This is what my team basically does every day. So you can see just an example of where we got the numbers, the one-on-one social emotional supports. They're in the classroom, they're doing case consultations with teachers and staff. We do home visits, we help our families navigate resources, we make health referrals. We also have a critical incident stress management team, and we track and manage hotlines, our child abuse and neglect hotlines. We have one clinician that is actually dedicated to managing and helping support our families that are trying to navigate that system, because it can be extremely difficult. Just for sustainability and capacity, one of the things, Board Chair Manzer, that you mentioned was the restorative practices. In addition to what Dr. Shepard spoke to, we also work with the Center for Conflict Resolution, who has trained about 13 staff in our district to be trainers, as well as they've been able to increase the number of schools that they are providing direct services to in our schools. So, and that will continue to expand next year as we find more funding. We've been able to find out funding to be able to train 15 individuals in our district in youth mental health first aid as certified trainers. And so we've been able to now train staff in youth mental health first aid. We've done one training so far, and we're scheduled to do 2 trainings during the Teacher Institute in July, and hopefully expand the Board of Education staff to offer youth mental health first training district-wide. And that is being currently funded through a grant. One of the other things I did want to highlight that we were just recently awarded to that wasn't on the slides, was we did apply for the Jackson County Community Children's Fund, which is that tax that you all may be familiar with, and we were awarded it this week. So those dollars are going to be able to help support our 2 alternative schools, Knott's and Anderson, to bring more social emotional supports and programming to help those students. Any questions? All right. Wow. Awesome.
Mr. Hogan?
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Tickner. This is great. And I know that as the board goes through orientation, we're going to be want to delve more deeply into it, but we appreciate the highlights for this evening. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And the next speaker is Dr. Sanders, our athletic director, who will report on 1.3.3 as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Bedell, how's everyone tonight? Got to have some energy up here, folks. Let's go now. It's athletics. Woo! Let's raise the roof. Okay, so we're going to, first off, I'd like to also introduce my associate athletic director, Meredith Doyle. I'm going to give the presentation and she will pick me up off the ground. Okay. So, the first slide we're going to talk about, it gives you a listing of the different sports that we currently have in the fall, winter, and spring semester. I heard my distinguished colleague earlier about the other activities and things that we have. At each high school and middle school, there are different clubs and activities. It's driven by the students' needs and stuff like that. So each one might have something different, but student council and things like that are basic fundamentals within our current high schools and middle schools environment. Okay, the next slide gives you, for our members that were here in the fall, to kind of give you a preview. This is what you saw in the fall, but for our new members, it talks a little bit about the total number of student athletes that we've had participating in the fall semester sports. As you saw on the previous slide, fall and spring are our two largest activity groups with all the sports. So in the fall of 2017, we had a total from the high schools, we had a total of 712 student performers. In this fall, we had a total of 823 for an increase of 111 student athletes participating in the fall sports, which is a tremendous increase. Our next move is to our winter sports season. Our numbers are down a few, but we're still making some headways. We've made some modifications and some adjustments to correct some of the things that we had go on, but we're still moving ahead and getting good numbers, but we can always get better. Our spring numbers were down just a shade on the high school level, but as you can tell, we're still trending where we like. We're moving forward, shall I say. But my next slide, I'm going to stop and I'm going to talk for a few minutes. And what I'm going to talk about here is 5 years ago, Kansas City Public Schools did not have middle school athletics. Well, the young folks that are juniors and sophomores are those first few folks. And out of those individuals, we've had a second place state basketball team, a second place state soccer team. We've had a fifth place young man placed in wrestling who was undefeated as an eighth grader. So the benefits of middle school sports helps feed the pipeline for high school sports. A couple other people I'd like to mention here in our in our middle school program. Our middle school athletic program, our folks at Northeast Middle last year, the boys tied the conference for soccer. Our girls in second place in cross country. And we had two young ladies, one Miss Downing and one Miss Hernandez. Miss Downing was the only Latino runner in the cross country event out of 180 runners. She placed 99th. And Miss Downing, out of 180 runners, she placed 79th. One was a sophomore, one was a freshman. But we noticed how good they were going to be, so we made sure that they got those kind of resources to make them better athletes. So, we are now showing you the fall numbers for middle school sports. And fall of 2017-18, we had 185 participants. And this fall, we had 176. So our numbers are still trending where we like it, upward and onward. Also, this year in the winter, we had We lost 2 students. We had 186 last year. This year we had 184. So we'll find those 2 students and we'll increase that as well. That's for our winter semester. Our spring, we are rocking and rolling. As you can tell, we had 254, and now we're at 319 student athletes for our spring. So our numbers are getting craziness. One other thing I'd like to talk about for our student athletes is, for a lot of you, Paseo introduced middle school sports this year. And prior to that, Paseo hasn't had any sports. But this year, Paseo had sports, and we had a championship dance and cheer team for Paseo. Won the middle school conference. Matter of fact, they were so good, we're going to have to change the rules of middle school grading next year for cheerleading because of their outstanding performance. And our final. We are going to branch out. We've had high school sports forever in the district. We've had middle school sports for the past 5 years. And our goal, my goal and Ms. Doyle, along with Dr. Bedell and everybody else, is to bring elementary school sports to the Kansas City Public Schools. Now, we are trying to launch a pilot program this spring. And what we're going to do with the pilot program, starting this Saturday, we're going to introduce elementary school flag football. We currently have middle school flag football, and we're trying to figure out how many teams we're going to have. It'll be a 5-week session, and after that, we'll have a week on a Saturday, April 27th. We are going to have basically kind of like a jamboree format with all the great kids coming to the central gym, working out on basketball skills, and then playing some games. But what I'm really excited about, and I've already asked Dr. Bedell. In my day, we called it field day. I'm a lot older than you guys, but field day is something special. And we're going to make it even more special this year because out of our 26 elementary schools, we're going to have each one, we're going to softball throw, frisbee throw, football throw, broad jump, long jump, 60 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, 30-yard, potato sack race, 4x100, 4x200, 400 melee, 800 melee, and cup stacking. Because one of the elementary schools said cup stacking is where they're at and they want to do it.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
So what we're going to do is out of each elementary school, we're going to ask them to pick their top 3 kids in these different events. And then we're going to meet out on May 18th, and Dr. Bedell will cut the ribbon for field day, and we will have field day. We're going to grill. We want to see everybody out there. We're going to be excited. And this is KCPS Athletics, and we're here to stay.
All right, thank you. All right. We'll go to a couple of questions. My first question to you is, can the board enter any event as a team? Maybe cup stacking, I don't know, but.
I've never seen cup stacking, but one of the coaches said he's really into it. I mean, he gave me the diagrams. I'm like, okay, cool. Okay, so we're probably going to do cup stacking probably at the field house because of the wind blowing the cups around.
Now we do have staff intramural days, and where the adults compete. So, okay, board.
We do have some athletes on this board. Mr. Abarca?
Yeah, so thank you for this wonderful report. I want to, challenge Dr. Bedell in this situation. In most schools, I think we have these 2 things, a gym and an auditorium. Yet we put a lot of presence on and focus and attention on athletics, but not equitable focus on necessarily our fine arts. And so I think in the future, if we can see, where's the debate team, where's student council, all of these things coupled, I would feel more confident in us achieving overall success because for me, there is no football game without a marching band. There is no court warming without a pep band.
We do have several pep bands we have one at East Central. He's back there, Mr. Madry. That was one of the things he harped on. He wanted a band, and his band was rocking and rolling. And matter of fact, we're asking the band to be in the hospital hill run as part of the drum beat that they'll be using running up the hill. So we're bringing those things to you as well.
Sure.
And go ahead.
I was going to say the last thing is there would be no Manny Abarca school board member without student council, debate, and these things. And I didn't do athletics, but that's the focus of some.
Well, let me chime in. So to your point, sir, one of the first things I did when I started was I invested in Debate KC. and we have competed at a very high level in debate in this school district. We have debate teams, not just at Lincoln, but at our high schools. I am huge on extracurricular programs. I tell people that it's more than just us offering sports, so we have constantly promoted students that will come to me and say, I want to start this type of social organization. We have granted them those opportunities, but what we have said was that we need to make sure that we have adults in the building that are willing to serve as sponsors. As long as we can continue to do that, we will continue to increase. But that is a big deal for me too, Mr. Abarca.
Ms. Cortez.
With regard to the middle school sports, do those teams expand to accommodate any student who wants to participate? Or are they limited to a certain number of kids? And like, how do you maximize participation?
We don't believe in cutting. And the reason we don't cut at those levels is because we want to gain the numbers in the high school. So middle school coaches don't cut. I'll use Lincoln. Lincoln had 35 kids for middle school basketball. So they would run 5 in at a time. Our goal is to, what we've saw over the past years here at KCPS is that the suburbs come here and cherry pick our kids. And they cherry pick the better ones, because we didn't have things for them to do. So my job, along with my distinguished colleague, is we ain't gonna let nobody cherry pick our kids. You know, the movie, Build It and They Will Come, I say build it and they'll stay. And our job is to make sure they're gonna stay in KCPS. So when we see you guys all at the state games, that's what you're paying for. We're gonna be there, and that's what our driving force is. I tell each coach at the start of the year, it doesn't mean a thing if you don't get to state. Our goal is to win state. Let them know KCPS is here, and we're coming to play you.
Are there any additional questions? All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Bedell, it's now in order for you to introduce business items for the April 24th board meeting.
The following 3 items will be brought to the board to take action on at our business meeting: the summer school calendar, U.S. Foods contract, and Belfonte Ice Cream Company contract.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who came out tonight. We're thrilled at the attendance and thrilled with your tenaciousness that you could hang in here with us through this report. This brings us to the conclusion of our agenda for this evening. You are invited to attend a reception that is hosted by the Kansas City Public Schools Education Foundation. We thank that board of the Education Foundation, the staff, and the volunteers for hosting a reception tonight. So if there is no objection, tonight's meeting will be adjourned. I have one question, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, can I have a point of personal privilege to acknowledge our Jackson County Legislator Jalen Anderson and former Minority Leader Gail McCain, who are here with us today?
Yes, thank you. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Let's eat cake.